The fourth picture is this one, Madeleine on the tennis court, the so-called tennis balls photo, which Kate McCann writes about at some length in her book. This picture is curious in several respects. I personally cannot be sure that this is a genuine photo. To illustrate what might be wrong with this photo, I am going to play a 50-second clip about it, made by Madeleine McCann campaigner Lizzie Taylor and now on YouTube, called Discrepancies, Madeleine's Mini Tennis. What is brought out in this clip is that two different people claim to have taken the photograph. As the video progresses, an even more startling discrepancy emerges. Kate McCann insists she took the tennis balls photo on the Tuesday at the children's mini tennis session. But the McCann's friend, Rachel Oldfield, says the photograph was taken while Madeleine was playing tennis on the Thursday that week, the very day she was reported missing. This is what Rachel Oldfield says in her statement. The 3rd of May was different to the others because, well, it was warmer weather-wise. We went to the Millennium for breakfast as usual. We did that every day. Jerry and Kate didn't. It was just too far for them to go with the twins. So they didn't ever go for breakfast up there, I think apart from the first morning. Matt and I had a tennis lesson at 11 o'clock. I just sat by the pool and read my book. Kate was there and we sat together and chatted a bit. Then I think it must have been about 10:30, Madeleine and Ella and their sort of group came to have a tennis lesson as part of their creche activities. And Kate didn't have her camera, and Jane was there then as well, and Jane took some photos of both Madeleine and Ella. That's one, the poster of Madeleine with the tennis balls. So Kate says she ran back and took the picture. Rachel says Jane took the tennis balls picture. But remember also the claim by Rachel that Madeleine was having a tennis lesson that morning, because as we shall see later on, Madeleine's creche nanny, Catriona Baker, tells an entirely different story about what Madeleine was doing that morning. These are not the only two issues about this photograph. First, where is everybody else? There is no one else in shot. Second, if 3-year-old children were supposed to be playing mini tennis at this time, why do we see proper tennis balls being carried and not these soft balls that might be used for such young children? Third, where are all the loose balls supposedly being collected? Fourth, Kate McCann describes the photo in her book in what seems unnecessary detail. For example, that Madeleine was keen to try on her new shoes and how gorgeous she looked in her t-shirt and shorts. She also states that when Madeleine was playing tennis, she didn't have her camera with her. She says she was so overwhelmed at how gorgeous Madeleine looked that she ran back to her apartment, collected her camera and rushed back to take this picture. It's a strange story because the time she had allegedly rushed back to collect her camera and returned, several minutes would have elapsed and the moment would have been lost. We don't have any more tennis ball photos, just this one. Did she only take that one? It's curious that we appear to have no other photographs of Madeleine after the ones taken on, I believe, Saturday, apart from this one, and the so-called last photo, which I'll come on to in just a moment. But fifth, there are some indications that this photo might have been photoshopped. I suggest that the body of the girl looks like that of a child older than 3. She appears to have a very red right arm, possibly with some scratch marks, which are unexplained. It is certainly Madeleine's head, but has that possibly been photoshopped onto the photo of another girl altogether? Some have suggested that the head looks slightly too far to the right of where it should be. Also, if we look at the last photo for a moment, we see that Madeleine has a very pale skin. Can this really be the same body that we see in the tennis balls photo, where she looks not only tanned but quite red in places? Then we have a question mark about the girl's shoes. She is not wearing the shoes that we saw her wearing in the photos from the playground. She is wearing white sandals. Kate McCann in her book unnecessarily describes what she says Madeleine was wearing. She looked so gorgeous in her little t-shirt and shorts, pink hat, ankle socks and new holiday sandals. Is she trying too hard to convince us that the tennis balls photo really is Madeleine? I don't know if it's been photoshopped, but what I can say is that I'm not prepared to accept this photo is what it purports to be. If two different people are supposed to have taken it, and it's supposed to have been taken on 2 different days. So we cannot use this photo as proof that Madeleine was alive either on the Thursday or the Tuesday. None of the 4 photos we've looked at prove that she was alive after the first day of the holiday. So now I come to the puzzle surrounding this so-called last photo. Jerry McCann, Amelie and Madeleine sitting by the poolside, said to have been taken at 2:29 p.m. precisely on Thursday the 3rd of May. It has been reproduced hundreds of times on TV and in the newspapers. An image just of Madeleine cropped from that photo has been displayed even more often. There's nothing else of Madeleine that week. Just the 3 photos taken on the first day. Then there is the strange tennis balls photo which we looked at just now, and now the 5th one, this so-called last photo. Only 4 or perhaps 5 photos for the whole of that week. That fact alone seems curious. The photo is a charming image of Madeleine. She is clearly seeing the funny side of something, maybe sharing a joke with someone. Her father may look a bit sombre, but Madeleine looks like a carefree young 3-year-old thoroughly enjoying her holiday. The McCanns say the picture was taken by Kate McCann, who had her son Sean, Amelie's twin, beside her as the photo was taken. That seems very probable. The 4 pictures that we can be certain were taken on that holiday certainly show Madeleine having fun running around the playground. But where are all the other photographs? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. No photos except for the controversial tennis balls photo and the last photo. Do any more exist? It seems inexplicable, but I think there is an explanation. Let's see what it might be. First question, was this last photo of Madeleine released straight away by the McCanns? No, it wasn't. It didn't see the light of day for a further 3 weeks. Let's look at this issue very closely. When the alarm was raised about Madeleine by the McCanns at about 10 p.m. on Thursday the 3rd of May, clearly this photo was in the McCanns' camera. Not only that, but if we look at the photos taken by the Portuguese police that night, there is a camera, bold as brass, lying on the living room table. Now, if the Portuguese police and the general public wanted to know what Madeleine looked like, as indeed they did, what better photograph could there be than this one? Taken only hours, so it is said, before she was reported missing. But, most strangely, the McCanns and fellow members of their Tapas 7 didn't use it when giving out a photograph of Madeleine to the police that night. Why not? So, before I go on to analyse that so-called last photo of Madeleine in more detail, let's examine another very strange affair and look at what actual first photograph they did produce for the police the night they reported Madeleine missing. This is it. And the very first thing we observe about this photo is that it is not from the holiday and appears to be a much younger Madeleine, possibly having been taken a year or even more earlier. Here are some other much earlier photographs of Madeleine for comparison. It is just one of the great puzzles of this case. Why, with a last photo like the one we've just been looking at, did they not use that one, but instead showed this one, which I'll call the first photo, by which I mean the first one to be released. According to the evidence of Jerry McCann, his Tapas 7 friend, Russell O'Brien, and one of the creche nannies, Amy Tierney, produced copies of this photo, which was on an SD memory card. They allegedly used a small printer belonging to Amy Tierney's boyfriend. It seems from their statements that Jerry McCann had with him not only an SD card with photos of his current holiday on it, but he was actually carrying another SD card or USB stick around with him which had much older photographs of Madeleine and the children on it. Or was he? I suppose it is also possible that he had kept his old photographs of Madeleine on his current SD card. Let's start by examining what the creche nanny, Amy Tierney, had to say about all this when she was questioned. Here is her first statement, and I'll read out the relevant paragraphs. She confirms that on the night of the disappearance she was on duty and immediately went to the bedroom to see if the girl was hiding. She saw that the shutter was raised and that the window was partially open. It was then that she began to look in the wardrobe to see if the girl was hiding. The first idea that occurred to her was that the girl could have left by her own means. However, after checking that the window was open and the shutter raised, she asked the parents whether Madeleine's shoes were there, to which they replied that they were. These facts led her to think that Madeleine could have been taken by someone. However, there was a bed against the window which could have enabled the girl to climb up onto it and then up to the window. The witness thinks it would not be possible, as she would not be able to open the shutters, and even if she had done so, she would have fallen outside, as the window was too high for a child of that age to be able to descend without falling. The witness confirms that the girl's father went to the reception to call the police as soon as her disappearance was noticed, and that 20 minutes had passed. The GNR took 30 to 35 minutes to arrive. Amy Tierney was quickly at the McCanns' apartment after the alarm was raised, helped in the search for Madeleine, had time to note the arrangement of the children's bedroom, and then her statement tells us how Jerry McCann went to the main Ocean Club reception area to report Madeleine missing. But tellingly, in that very first statement of hers, there is no mention whatsoever of her role that night in producing photos of Madeleine for the police. It was not until nearly a year later, 17th of April 2008, that she made a further statement when she told the Leicestershire Police this, as part of a series of so-called rogatory interviews conducted by the British police on behalf of the Portuguese police. When questioned and shown the photographs referred to in the previous statements depicting the English girl on Kodak Extra Life paper, 10 cm by 15 cm, she stated they were printed on her printer, also a Kodak brand. One of the friends of the McCann couple, Russell, asked for a USB memory stick reader in order to print photographs of Madeleine. Immediately the deponent replied that she did not have a USB reader, but that she had a printer with this hardware which could read from memory sticks. She went to her room and returned to the tapas with the printer, where she printed out 20 to 30 photographs of the girl using her own paper in 10 by 15 format mentioned previously. The memory stick containing the photos belonged to the McCann couple and came from their camera. She thinks that all of this took place at about midnight on the 3rd of May 2007. She presumes that she handed all of the photos to Russell, who distributed them to those present. The rest would be for the police authorities. As regards her printer, she says that it is no longer in her possession and it is now with her boyfriend in France. She says, after consultation and in accordance with her previous statements, that it was a Kodak model EasyShare G60 of thermal ink transfer with continuous tonality. So, examining that statement, we learn the following. 1. The McCann's friend Russell O'Brien at about midnight went to the Ocean Club reception when Amy Tierney was at her desk in the tapas bar. She was a nanny. What work exactly was she doing at a desk at midnight? She says he asked her for a USB memory stick reader so he could print photographs of Madeleine. That means that he, or someone in his group, had a printer available or access to a printer. But why not simply hand the USB stick to the police? Amy Tierney says she hasn't got a memory stick reader, but she can print them on her own printer. She describes this as a Kodak model EasyShare G60. So she says clearly that this was her own printer, not someone else's. 4. The memory stick, or the photos on it, was from the McCanns camera, not that of Russell O'Brien. So there we have it. These pictures were taken from a memory stick belonging to the McCanns. 5. Finally, she now says that actually the printer was not hers, but was her boyfriend's, and that he and the printer are now in France. And that last point means that her story about whether these early photos of Madeleine were actually printed on this printer can't be verified. We also might note that she comes over vague towards the end of her statement. She says that she thinks that all of this took place at about midnight. She says she presumes that she handed all of the photos to Russell O'Brien. Does she not clearly remember these things from the fateful night? And she had had plenty of time to prepare for this re-interview in 2008. She goes on to say that Russell O'Brien distributed the photos to those present, but doesn't tell us who those present actually were. She says the rest of the photos would be for the police, but she makes no mention of the police ever asking for the photos. The use of would be is also a sign of possible deception. A truthful person would simply have said these photos were for the police. All in all, when we look at her statement and at the same time recall that she never mentioned anything about helping to produce these photos when first questioned, we are left with serious doubts about whether she is telling us the truth. Here surely is a deep mystery. The McCanns decide on the need for a photo to help in the search for Madeleine. They have an up-to-date one taken just hours earlier, yet they choose this one. Her hair is cut shorter, both around her forehead and at the sides. But much more important than that, it is of a much younger Madeleine. On the day Madeleine was reported missing, she was just 9 days short of her 4th birthday. Yet if we look through assorted photos of Madeleine, which the McCanns have produced over the years, we can deduce that Madeleine was probably no more than 2.5 to 3 years old when this photo was taken. Why would the parents want people at the Ocean Club and staying in the village to see a photo taken maybe up to 18 months ago, when they had one taken hours ago, and certainly also those 3 playground photos of her earlier in the week? It makes no sense at all. It cries out for a convincing explanation. But let's now return to Amy Tierney's account of the printing of those photos. The camera seen on the table in the McCann's apartment is a Canon PowerShot. Some other photos were taken by their friends, the Paynes, possibly with an Olympus camera. Experts have advised me that you could not use either the Canon camera or the Olympus to print direct from camera the photograph we're calling the first photo. The printer, if the camera itself is docked on the printer, can print from a USB key. However, I am informed that such a small printer as was claimed to have been used would be unlikely to be able to print as many as 30 copies without running out of ink. Moreover, the paper that was used to print those photos does not appear to have been readily available in that area of Portugal at that time. The aspect ratio of this photograph is wrong for the Canon. It seems then that if there ever was a USB key given by Russell O'Brien to Amy Tierney, then it must already have had this first photo on it before they went on holiday. Both Russell O'Brien and Amy Tierney talk about just one photo, just one pose. But Russell O'Brien in his evidence seems to be talking of a different photo of Madeleine, one of her in a bright red dress. But the plot thickens. Both witnesses, Russell O'Brien and Amy Tierney, speak only of one photo, but in fact there were 2 photos. This one, of Madeleine in a red dress, was released a day or 2 later, and when Russell O'Brien is questioned about the first photo a year later, he mixes it up with the red dress photo. Yet a further problem arises when we look at when the first police officers arrive. and at the statement of one of the senior staff, Sylvia Batista. The first police to arrive on the scene were the local GNR. They arrived at about 11:10 p.m. They are handed copies of this out-of-date picture of Madeleine, the so-called first photo, soon after they arrive. The statement of Sylvia Batista makes clear that the photos were handed to the police well before midnight. So it looks, for a start, as though Amy Tierney was probably wrong in claiming that she was approached at midnight and only then went to get her boyfriend's printer and start printing. She says was approached at her desk at midnight. What was she doing behind a desk at midnight has never been explained. According to her evidence, she then has to go to her room, get the printer, return to the tapas bar, and then set up the printer and paper. All of that might take several minutes. We know that the Kodak printer takes some time to print each photo, as much as 90 seconds. If she printed off 30 photos, as is claimed, that alone would take at least 3/4 of an hour. The more we study this, there is an obvious contradiction between Sylvia Batista's evidence that she handed out these 6x4 pictures well before midnight and the claims made by Russell O'Brien and Amy Tierney that they only started trying to get these pictures printed on a small Kodak printer after midnight. Russell O'Brien was questioned extensively about his role in producing these photos of Madeleine in 4 separate sessions at Leicestershire Police Headquarters on the 8th of April 2008, and 2 days later on the 10th. Throughout the questioning, Russell O'Brien refers to just one photo, and as we saw, he described a different photo, the one of Madeleine in a red dress, which was released separately a couple of days after Madeleine was reported missing. Still more puzzling, when he tries to recollect what happened that night, he makes no mention whatsoever of anything about a USB key or even of Amy Tierney, the nanny who supposedly helped him print the photos, instead stating that it was another nanny, Catriona Baker, Madeleine's nanny in the Lobster Group. You would think that since Russell O'Brien signed his own daughter into the very same creche as Madeleine that week, he should be able to tell Amy Tierney from Cat Baker. Throughout his many interviews with the police over those 2 days, he is vague and evasive. He claims he cannot really remember what photo it was, stating that he'd seen so many that week. Yet the village of Praia de Luz and the surrounding areas were plastered with hundreds of posters made from this first photo for weeks, so it's rather strange that he can't remember the right one. Could both Russell O'Brien and Amy Tierney be lying about their claims of printing off these photos after midnight on a Kodak printer? It was one of the questions the Portuguese police became interested in long after the early frantic searches for Madeleine were over. It was on the 17th of April 2008, nearly a full year after Madeleine went missing, that Amy Tierney was questioned by Leicestershire Police. The police report tells us, as regards her printer, she says that it is no longer in her possession, as it is now with her boyfriend in France. And that was the end of that. Her story about her printer having been used that night could simply not be verified. Amy Tierney was interviewed by Leicestershire Police on the 17th of April, just a week after Russell O'Brien was interrogated on the 8th and 10th of April. Contrary to Russell O'Brien's evidence that the nanny he gave the USB stick to was Katrina, she confirms that it was she, Amy Tierney, to whom Russell O'Brien handed her the USB key. But we have one other piece of evidence that this whole story is probably bogus. Contrary to claims that Russell O'Brien was busy supervising the printing of the photographs between midnight and 1 a.m, on his own admission, he was busy at the time in the McCanns' apartment writing out 2 different timelines of the evening's events on the inside cover of Madeleine's activity sticker book and handing them to the second set of Portuguese police officers, the Judicial Police, or the PJ. If, on his own testimony, he was in the McCanns' apartment writing out the timelines for the PJ, how could he have been standing around in the tapas bar waiting for photographs to be printed, one at a time at 90-second intervals? To sum up then, the entire story about Russell O'Brien using Amy Tierney's printer to print off these so-called first photos falls apart. This question must be asked. Was this first photo of Madeleine prepared much earlier? maybe before the events of that evening, maybe even on the previous day. The evidence suggests that the McCanns may have got these first photo prints done elsewhere, and have not told us where and when and how they did this. Perhaps it's yet another deceit in a catalogue of deceptions. Now it's time to take a detailed look at some strange goings-on concerning the cameras of the McCanns and the Paynes, and the whole way these photos, or some of them, were made public. These are the bare facts about the last photo. 1. The photograph was certainly taken that week. 2. It shows Jerry McCann, one of the twins Amelie and Madeleine, sitting by the pool. 3. It is sunny at the moment it was taken. 4. The shadows are very short. The sun is at its highest in Portugal at about 1:35 p.m. that time of year, so it must have been taken around that time of day. 5. Jerry looks lightly tanned in this photo. 6. Yet in photos of him taken at the end of the week, after Madeleine had been reported missing, he looks to be significantly more tanned. 7. Despite many weird and wonderful claims that this photo has been photoshopped, 2 world experts in photography and photoshopping, after extensive forensic analysis, have pronounced this photograph to be a genuine photograph with no photoshopping. The 2 experts were asked by a Madeleine McCann researcher to give their opinions on condition of anonymity. He has shown me their reports. The researcher put to the 2 experts a range of amateur opinions that the photo may have been photoshopped this, that or the other way, including claims that one or other of the 3 individuals in the shot had been photoshopped into the photo to create a composite picture. 8. One expert is a highly respected university professor of photography. The other is the owner of a major digital photography business. One of their main lines of evidence is that all shadows on the photograph are consistent with each other and with the position of the sun at that time, high in the sky in the south. And such 100% consistency of shadows is almost impossible to fake. So just to make it clear that we are talking about a genuine photograph here, not a photoshopped one, here is the professor's opinion. Quote, I have taken an initial look at the image. The artifacts alluded to in the PDF document that you sent are simply JPEG compression artifacts as described here. If you magnify other parts of the image, you will see similar artifacts. I also performed a forensic analysis to determine if the lighting and the shadows on the people and background are consistent. They are. I see no other anomalies in the photo. So, at first glance, I see no evidence of photo tampering. But then the professor adds something very important. I will add that it is fairly easy to change dates on an image's metadata or for these dates to be wrong. The owner of the major digital photography business held the same view. From what I saw, I couldn't see anything that would lead me to believe beyond reasonable doubt it had been doctored. The fringing mentioned can be caused by auto-sharpening used in consumer digital cameras to make better or sharper images. These artifacts can often be made worse from image compression algorithms out of Photoshop or other image manipulation software. According to the McCanns, the photo was taken at 2:29 p.m. on the 3rd of May, hours before Madeleine was reported missing. But could the date or time it was taken have been changed? The last photo made its first appearance in a coordinated set of releases to the press on Thursday the 24th of May, exactly 3 weeks after Madeleine's reported disappearance. I am now going to explore what might have been happening to that photo, or rather the memory card on which it was located, during those 3 weeks. After that, I will show you a raft of evidence that suggests this so-called last photo was actually taken on Sunday the 29th of April, the second day of the McCanns' holiday, 4 days before the McCanns say it was taken.